Hello friends, thank you for joining me today. So this is my August wrap up, and I almost decided not to even film this because if you watched my last video, I'd mentioned that my fiance and I were trying to buy a house, hopefully, and last Friday we got the keys. So we bought a house and we are kind of in the process of packing up all our stuff and moving it over. We have until the end of the month, and this bookshelf is still fully stocked, so I wasn't sure if I'd be able to have time with all the craziness to film one more time before moving, in which case I wouldn't be able to film until October, but found some time, just decided to go ahead and film this. So this will be my last time filming in this setup. It'll probably look similar. This is the only real big bookshelf I have, so I'm gonna have to acquire more bookshelves because we're gonna have a room that's just gonna be full of books, several bookshelves, and I'm just really excited about it. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the books that I read in August. So the first thing that I finished was Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor. I got this through Owl Crate, and this is a late 1800s France inspired YA fantasy about a girl named Janny and her younger sister Zosa. And in this world, magic exists, but it's very dangerous and hard to control, and the only accepted place where it's safe to use is within this magic traveling hotel called Hotel Magnifique. It disappears and reappears somewhere new every midnight, and Janny and her younger sister are hired as employees at this hotel in the hopes that they'll be able to eventually make their way back to their hometown, but the hotel isn't the perfect, incredible place that it advertises itself to be. It's also dangerous, and Janny has to find a way for her and her sister to escape the hotel and their magically binding contracts. I really liked the concept behind this, and it gave me vibes of Spirited Away, but it wasn't as good as Spirited Away by any means, but there are a lot of similar elements in both. But I ended up giving this just 2 out of 5 stars. I couldn't even actually tell you at what point I started actively losing interest, which isn't a good sign that I couldn't even tell you when. It just happened, and after the initial kind of flurry of the main character and her sister getting inside the hotel, and after you get your first taste of the very whimsical and cool setting, it all just blended together at this point. Especially, I didn't care about any of the characters or their relationships. I didn't care about the budding romance that happens. It's boring and meaningless, and I didn't believe in it at any point. The plot felt scattered and random. Things just work out for our character all the time, and there's sort of a cheap explanation for it, basically being called enhanced luck, which is, it's like, okay, okay, sure, but that just turns our main character into, a Mary Sue. The author also has a weird habit of being oddly focused on describing every character's skin color. Even the most insignificant person just passing by on the street, she will ascribe a skin color to and say nothing else about their physicality. And diversity is good, obviously, but it felt like the author was pulling random skin tones out of a hat every time a human being came onto the page, and she didn't know how to describe people with any other traits. She was like, oh, okay, their skin color is this person's skin color is this. It really stands out and just made the writing seem really repetitive and rudimentary, in my opinion. I honestly don't have much more to say about this aside from the beautiful physical presentation. The words actually on this edition are glow in the dark. A lot of these elements are glow in the dark, and the end pages are stunning. Really, the book is really pretty. Aside from that, this was nothing really exciting or memorable to me. The setting inside the hotel is very cool. I like that setting. It's shifting and living and magical, but a cool setting alone does not a compelling story make for me. It's a standalone, it doesn't end in a cliffhanger, but there are like a couple things left open that could be addressed in a sequel, which I personally wouldn't care to read if she ever does write a sequel. Then I listened to an audiobook that brought things back up into higher ratings, and that was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir and narrated by Ray Porter. And this was the Goodreads Choice Award winner for science fiction in 2021. You're following a guy named Ryland Grace who wakes up in a spaceship with much of his memory missing. He can't remember who he is, how he got there, why he's there, but the two other crew members traveling with him have died. So he's the only one left alive on the spaceship with a crew of 3. And this is told in first-person perspective in a split timeline, one being the present in the spaceship and the other in the past in the form of his memories that slowly come back to him over the course of the book. And it turns out that he is humanity's last hope of survival, and he ends up working together with an unexpected ally. So yeah, this has first contact with aliens if you like that sci-fi trope. I have not read The Martian, which is also by Andy Weir, and I did watch the movie, but remember almost nothing about it except when he's like growing potatoes, I think, is the only thing I remember about the movie. So the author is essentially new to me. I've heard this has lots of similarities to The Martian, but can't speak to that myself. I had a great time listening to this. This was 5 out of 5 stars. Ray Porter does a fantastic job narrating and really endeared me to the main character. And this book was just, it was fun, it was funny, and also really interesting. This was basically a book of science experiments. Grace is faced with saving humanity using science, and every test that he does, every theory he comes up with, all of the research he does, he walks you through every step of the way. So, you know, someone that isn't literate in science or math can still understand it. I can see how someone could be bored by this because it is so sciencey, but it was so fascinating and interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. The main character is really funny. This is a funny book, even though the circumstances are dire, and sometimes the humor was a bit corny, but on the whole, it was still great. I loved the ally that he meets on the way, and the audiobook was very immersive in that regard. There is some fun sound design stuff going on, and the ending was touching, sad, and happy. I finished it with a big smile on my face, which is rarer than you might think to finish a book where you're actually like, yeah, like I had a big smile on my face at the end. I just really enjoyed it. Loved the sciencey stuff. This isn't necessarily action-packed, but there are still really intense moments, exciting moments, heart-stopping moments, and it just made me like respect the power of science and math and just wonder at the possibilities of, you know, what might be out there in the universe. I love space. It was a great book, 5 out of 5 stars. And then I read This Wicked Fate by Kalynn Bayron. This is the second book in a duology, and I got the first book, which is called This Poison Heart, in an Owl Crate box. And so far, to date, that is the only book from Owl Crate that I've given 5 stars. So the first book is a contemporary, well, the first book and this book is a contemporary fantasy about a girl named Briseis who has the ability to manipulate plants. And she inherits this estate from her late aunt that is very conducive to her power. And there's something hidden there on the land that a lot of people want to get their hands on, and she has to use her gift to protect her family. So this takes place right after the first book ends and has spoilers, so I won't get into specifics, but I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. It had a slow build up with a lot of investigating and research that I still enjoyed for the most part, even though it was, you know, slow. Both books have a lot of Greek mythology in them, actually, and this second book even more so than the first, specifically about the goddess Circe and her niece Medea, and I loved all of that. I love the earthy power that Bree has. I just wish that she could have done more like offensive fighting things with it, but I am just a fan of action and fighting scenes, so that's just my personal opinion. The bad guys in this book are like super straightforward. There's nothing overly interesting there if you are someone who prefers your bad guys to be like well developed and complicated. You know, they're not in here. There's a sapphic romance between the main character and a girl named Marie. That's pretty surface level, but it was still enjoyable. There's actually several sapphic romances going on, and in this book, as well as in the first book, everyone has really healthy and good relationships with one another, which is kind of refreshing. People communicate with each other and respect and love each other. It's a story about family and generational trauma and perseverance. I really enjoyed this sequel. This was an excellent duology. I'm really happy that I read this and happy that I can display these on my shelves. Then another book from Owl Crate, Ballad and Dagger by Danielle Jose Older. This is the first book in a duology, and it's a YA urban fantasy about a diaspora community displaced from their island home called San Madrigal when it sinks beneath the sea and the survivors relocate to New York. The main character is a boy named Mateo who feels like an outsider in his own community, and one night during this big celebration he witnesses someone he knows commit murder, and it brings him into a tense political climate and a growing mystery surrounding his lost homeland, and he discovers that he has powers of his own that play a role in everything going on. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. This was a bit of a weird read for me. I think that this was very well written, but I am very much not the target audience, and I really felt that with this. I read a lot of YA and enjoy YA, but I don't know, this one felt particularly young to me. It's written in the first person point of view from the perspective of Mateo, who is a 16-year-old boy in modern day, so some of the language and general vibes just felt very young and not something that I related to or necessarily cared to read about. I never got into the plot or the characters. Mateo is very awkward, which some readers will relate to, and his love of music means there are music metaphors and similes and descriptions everywhere, which got kind of tedious to read. Personally, I just felt they got kind of annoying, and not annoying, but it was just kind of tedious to read. The diaspora mix is really interesting, and the author has clear opinions on empire and the negative things that come from conquest, but there aren't any like in-depth discussions about it. I just never cared overly much about the plot or the characters, and I don't really have much else to say. I still think, again, that it's still well written. 3 out of 5, it was fine. It was good. It's not for me. I'm not the target audience. So yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. It was still good. If it sounds interesting, definitely check it out. But it was just not for me. Then I finished the second book in the Wells of Sorcery fantasy series by Django Wexler. It's called City of Stone and Silence, and I listened to it as an audiobook, just like the first book, narrated by Catherine Ho and Nancy Wu. And I won't spoil anything for you if you haven't read this series yet, but the first book, which is called Ship of Smoke and Steel, follows a girl named Isoka, who is a mage blood and can access one of several wells of sorcery, and a spy master for the Emperor discovers her ability and threatens to do terrible things to her younger sister unless she goes on this mission for him, and she's tasked with commandeering this legendary ghost ship called Soliton, and and bringing it back to him. And this ginormous ship is crewed by other powerful mage bloods, and she has to figure out how to survive and rise up through this hierarchy to take control of the ship and ensure her sister's safety. And I gave the second book 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it for the most part. You're following 2 perspectives compared to just one, which is Isoka's in book 1. In this second book, you're also following her younger sister Tori, and I found some of Tori's chapters to be a little boring, but her character development is really something. It's really well done. I loved all the parts with Isoka in a different setting than book 1, but it's pretty cool, and you delve into a different aspect of her power. And this series is just a fun, action-packed fantasy that I'm really enjoying. I'm looking forward to seeing how it all ends in the 3rd and final book, which I actually just started a couple days ago on audiobook. So, yeah, working on the last book. And the last book that I read in August was a very short one, and it's an audiobook called The Haunting of Clandestine House by Celina Myers. It's about a girl named Hannah who buys this old mansion out in the middle of nowhere in, I believe, Canada to renovate and just start her life fresh. But the locals say that it's haunted. People have disappeared there over the years, including the original family, the Clandestines, and weird stuff starts to happen when Hannah moves in. And honestly, this will be like my shortest review ever, because this was a perfectly fine, average haunted house story. 3 out of 5 stars. There was nothing revolutionary about it, but it wasn't bad. It was very typical. It's kind of what you expect. I got through the audiobook in a few hours, so it was a quick read, even though it took a little while to actually get into the really spooky territory. And I don't have much more to say about it, honestly. It was just fine. It was good prep for October coming up, I guess. And it was also narrated by the author herself, which was very cool. So 3 out of 5 stars, very standard, nothing bad, nothing great. And those are all of the books that I read in August. Coming to you probably near the end of September. We'll see, maybe I'll be able to edit this today, but we'll see. I'm very busy kind of packing stuff up little by little and taking trips to carry boxes to the house. I'm moving locally, so that's good. But yeah, there's just a lot of stuff to take care of. Very busy. So yeah, hopefully I will be able to film my September wrap up in a somewhat put together room, or at least I'll have a bookshelf that'll be looking nice behind me. But we're really excited to be moving into our new house. We've been renting for several years now, I think almost like 4 years, 5 years. I'm really bad with dates. But we're really excited to be moving into our new house. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.